Well, this was a very pleasant episode of Fruits Basket. It had its emotional charm for sure, but walking in and out of this episode, I just had a grin on my face. I laughed quite a few times and felt a little bit of a pinch to my heart watching this episode and really getting to know Arisa a lot better than we did up to this point. I mean, clearly Toru's friends were someone important, and of course, because this is Fruits Basket, we were going to touch upon every character at some point, but it was nice to see this kind of wannabe gang leader or gang member and seeing like what ultimately led her to calm down and not be so aggressive like she was in the past, even touching upon Toru's mother and kind of what caused her to maybe relax a little bit. And it was really interesting kicking off the episode to how it ended, because the episode starts off seeing, her go home from the past, and clearly her father had a drinking problem and she just seemed very destroyed. I wasn't expecting that intro scene to actually transition to her actually starting to feel normal, as if maybe the life that Toru had with her mother is what she wanted to chase after, not this kind of idolized and kind of, almost fantasized version of her mother where it was this tough punk girl, not a mother who loved her daughter. It was actually a really nice contrast and transition from the intro to the ending. It was very solid directing overall. And this episode was just great looking at just the whole kind of theme of relaxing, because if you really take a look at who she was before she started to, hang around with Toru and be maybe a bit more less aggressive and more of a normal high school girl, she was a wannabe gangster, hanging out, picking fights, bike gangs, things like that. And it's not a healthy lifestyle just with her version and just the people she was hanging out with, talking about, oh, smother your father in the sleep, steal money, beat people up. Like, that's not good. That's a life of crime that would eventually spiral her out of control. And it was interesting seeing how, this gang she was a part of, she always heard stories about Toru's mother, this girl who could kick all the ass. She was a leader of a gang, kind of promoting, like, holy shit, a female can do something. She can actually be a leader. It was interesting how she kind of had this predetermined image, and then when she bumps into her daughter and how she's just this, like, bubbly idiot in her eyes, and how she meets her idol and it's nothing like she expected, which I think is actually a really important theme to touch upon within Fruits Basket, because most people, they'll have a band, an actor, something like that they've never met, but they've heard stories, or maybe they just read stories about someone and they're like, if only I could meet them. I have all these kind of ideas and visions in my mind, and then when you meet them, they're usually not what you expect, because everyone's just a person at the end of the day. Even if you do something amazing, that amazing deed doesn't represent who you are on a daily basis. And for someone like Toru's mother, who eventually had a family, at some point she started to relax and maybe focus on her daughter rather than being some tough punk girl, things like that. And I think that's actually really important, because that interaction immediately started to shape Arisa into someone completely different. Not someone who, neglected family and kind of pushed away her emotions, maybe started to go actually headfirst into them, because we learned in this episode her mother left when she was very young for another man and just left her father and her alone, causing one kid to basically rebel and try to become a criminal, with the father just losing himself in alcohol and just substance abuse. And that's a very tragic and sad story, but it's interesting how immediately, without even realizing it, the person she worshipped, the idol, her gang leader that she always wanted to meet, is still that person she's admired. It's just she was trying to push back against that, where she wanted a mother figure, someone strong who could guide her down the correct path, and immediately, even though she was mad at this, she recognized that this was the person who she needed to meet. It's just she wasn't some punk ass who was beating up people. She was hugging her daughter and was willing to give that comfort to a lonely child who wasn't even hers. That's really interesting, and just I love the idea of relaxation in this episode, how even getting a glimpse of her old gang and just how they keep trying to, like, kind of jump her or maybe shake her up, try to get her back to join the gang, but they're just, looking at Kyo and Yuki, just being like, oh my god, they're so hot, or like they're trying to practice their scare maneuvers on poor Momoji, and it just completely backfires with his German accent. I just love it. It's just so funny when you see some of these reactions, especially in the early stages where, like, in the backstory where you have just her shaking up the classmates for walking all over poor Toru. Absolutely adore it. But even just like the simpler moments in the intro before we start doing like the flashback and focusing more on Arisa, it was really interesting just seeing Toru in just such an innocent moment, how like she took care of herself. She didn't want to waste money, and if a bathing suit still worked for her, she wasn't going to go waste money on that when she could focus on things that take more priority. And it was interesting seeing just how, like, you have someone like her who is just like looking at this as like, this is so sad. It's almost like looking at like an elderly person, which I honestly agree with that mindset. A lot of times when you do see a lot of older people, it's just sad thinking like, it's just like that concept of death is so close to them, and it can actually make you sad. I completely understand Arisa's mentality there. I completely relate to that. And it was interesting just seeing how she applied that to poor Toru because she was dressing like a grandma, and how they all kind of agree that it's time to buy her a bathing suit. They easily could have just made that simple fan service and nothing really of any significance or substance. But I love how it was actually a really charming moment where it is, look it, she does all this shit for you, she does all this shit for us, let's buy her something nice so she doesn't look like a grandma and actually can, capture her beauty and not feel like she's out of place anymore. It was really cute and adorable seeing that scene play out and just them picking the bathing suit and just poor Kyo and Yuki in the background just being looked at by all the females. Completely relate to that. When you're a young kid, with your mother and she's clothes shopping, you're like, what the hell am I doing here? When you're in high school and you're still trying to get your hormones all straightened out and you're with girls or whatever, you're like, what the hell, I don't belong in this shop, I'm gonna go hang out by the food court or something like that. It's such a relatable moment for a lot of guys, I can guarantee you. It's something that most go through, both with parents as well as just girlfriends or just female friends, things like that. And yeah, you get embarrassed. I completely understand where they're coming from. And I love how they break the ice by basically just making them argue over what color is best for them, blue or orange, and then ultimately Hana just comes in being like, nah, it's pink. Mother and father, red and white, it's pink. You guys are both stupid. I absolutely love the comedy in this episode. It was very subtle, but the moments that really had funny lines and just ridiculous close-up shots, they had me laughing. There was one point where I did have to pause and just be like, I can't believe Fruits Basket. It is so funny by just being natural comedy and not trying to shove a joke down your throat, and I absolutely adore it. This episode was just such a pleasant one. Like, it obviously had its darker themes and just kind of moody atmosphere, but really 90% of this episode, I was smiling. I just really enjoyed seeing the backstory. Obviously the backstory's not done yet, but you really got a good sense of what was happening with Arisa in this episode and just the whole gang mentality, and how immediately, because she didn't have a mother, she started to maybe, worship what Toru had, maybe secretly craving it, starting to question her own desires, getting a glimpse of why she abandoned the bike life that is for her mother, of course. And I just love that. I love seeing just the past, but also the present, and how they're telling this story, but not in like an info dump way, but rather in a way that just feels like they're naturally getting to know one another. And alongside Kyo and Yuki, you're like, oh, this is why they all love this mother so much. I wish we could have met her, because she clearly was a great person, who I'm sure has her own faults in the past as well, and it'll be interesting to learn more about Toru's mother. But it was just fun seeing how they just explore such, in a lot of authors' hands, would be touchy subject matter, but they're exploring it in such an elegant way that it feels so genuine and human, not artificial, not like an anime scene, but you're watching real characters explore their own self-doubt, their own backstory, and feeling like we're getting to know these characters and becoming friends with them alongside characters such as Kyo as well as Yuki. And I just love the balance of comedy, the just learning so much about these characters who easily could have just been mindless side characters who were just funny, some who can just, predict the waves off people, and one who's, beat up people who badmouth Toru, but no, we actually get to learn about them as a person. And I think learning about people as a person rather than just being the personality or trope of the week is what really sells Fruits Basket as being such a great character-driven series, where if you gotta go dramatic, if you gotta go funny, or if you gotta go slice of life, it feels so genuine and just heartfelt that you completely buy into the atmosphere and you just lose yourself in the beauty. You can have such adorable scenes with Toru just swimming innocently like a child, and you just smile alongside her friends being like, this is so adorable but a little sad because of the bathing suit she's wearing, but you just want to smile and hug her because she feels like such a precious angel who's suffering so much and putting her self-worth just completely out the window, and you want to guide her down a correct path. But at the same time, it's not just Toru, it's this entire cast that at some point have suffered or are currently suffering, and how you can guide them down that better tomorrow. And that's why I love this episode. It was such a great episode. But I mean, every episode has been great at some point. Pretty much know what we're going to get, or at least that's how I feel. Walking into the episode, the first few minutes, you see kind of what character you're probably going to focus on, but by the time the episode wraps up, it's not what I was expecting in the slightest. It's something completely different, and I don't even really want to compare it to other anime. This episode easily could have been a swimsuit episode, and you're like, okay, yeah, I can pick basically 90% of the anime airing in any season, and we can find a swimsuit episode, but that's not what this episode was in the slightest. The actual bathing suit concept actually had significant to character growth and just really interesting just dialogue overall, with the primary focus being on just the backstory of Arisa as well as Toru's mother, and just seeing what led them down a biker path but also freed them from it, and just the idea of relaxing and how important that is, where we get caught up in the highway of life, feeling like it's always a traffic jam, but sometimes just taking a step back to relax and realizing that the simplistic beauty in life is far more important than the crazy plans we come up with in our head. And that's just simply brilliant. I love this week's episode of Fruits Basket. Absolutely incredible, and side characters who easily could have been disposable are rising up my character rankings list because that's how great the writing is for this wonderful series. For everyone who has any thoughts on this episode of Fruits Basket, Basket this review. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you did enjoy, remember to leave a like and also hit that subscribe button. If you have any news, so until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.